This is the Varghmir Saga, Tales of the North, where every oath has a price. Chapter 3. The Raven's Daughter. 7 days had passed since the hunt in the dark woods. 7 days since Eirik had looked into the eyes of Sigrid Ravenvik and seen something that haunted his dreams more than any battle scream or raven's warning. The dying warrior's words echoed in his mind like distant thunder. The dark ships, they come from the eastern sea. Death itself sails for all our shores. But Magnus Varghmir had forbidden all talk of such nonsense. Ravenvik poison, he called it. Lies meant to weaken our resolve. Yet Eirik saw how his father's hand lingered on his sword hilt when he thought no one was watching, how his gray eyes turned often toward the eastern horizon where the sea met the sky. The morning sun hung pale and cold above Varghmir fjord, its light struggling through the mist that clung to the water like the breath of sleeping gods. Eirik stood at the harbor's edge, watching the fishing boats return with the night's catch. Their holds were full, their crews laughing and calling out to friends on shore. But even their joy seemed muted, as if the very air carried whispers of distant troubles. "You brood like an old man, brother." Astrid's voice made him turn. She approached along the wooden dock, her long blonde hair braided with silver threads that caught the morning light. In her hands she carried a bowl of hot porridge and honey, the same meal she had brought him every morning since they were children. "I think," Eirik said quietly, accepting the bowl. "Is that so strange a thing for a warrior to do?" "It is when the warrior thinks so hard he forgets to eat." She settled beside him on the dock's edge, her feet dangling above the dark water. "Tell me what troubles you. I know it is more than just the hunt." Eirik ate in silence for a long moment, tasting the sweetness of the honey, feeling the warmth of the porridge spread through his chest. How could he tell her about the strange pull he felt when he looked into Sigrid Ravenvik's eyes? How could he explain that her voice followed him into sleep, that her laugh haunted his waking hours? "The raven's warning," he said finally. It was not the whole truth, but it was truth enough. It said the first blood I spill will not be my enemies. In the forest, I killed berserkers, madmen. But the prophecy speaks of something else, something I have not yet done. Astrid's hand found his, her fingers warm and strong. Perhaps the raven spoke in riddles, as spirits often do. Perhaps the blood you spill will be your own, shed in service to our clan, in defense of those you love. Perhaps. But Eirik did not believe it. The old seer had taught him to read the signs, to understand the weight of words spoken by the gods' messengers. The raven had meant exactly what it said, and the fulfillment of its prophecy still lay ahead of him like a wolf waiting in tall grass. A horn sounded from the harbor watchtower, 3 long blasts that echoed across the fjord like the voice of a giant. The signal for approaching ships, unknown vessels on the water. Eirik leaped to his feet, his bowl forgotten. On the eastern horizon, black dots moved against the pale sky. Ships under full sail, driving hard toward Varghmir waters. As they drew closer, details became clear. Sleek hulls built for speed, dark sails marked with symbols that made Eirik's blood quicken. Ravens, black ravens spread winged across crimson fields. "Ravenvik," Astrid breathed. "They come in force." But these were not warships. As the vessels entered the harbor, Eirik could see they flew no battle banners, carried no boarding crews. Their crews worked their oars with the steady rhythm of men on urgent business, not the frenzied pace of warriors charging into battle. The lead ship struck the dock with a crash that shook the wooden planks. From its prow leaped Sigrid Ravenvik, and Eirik's heart stopped at the sight of her. Gone was the armor of war he had seen in the forest. Instead, she wore a cloak of midnight blue that flowed around her like captured starlight, her golden hair unbound and streaming in the sea breeze. But her beauty could not hide the urgency in her movements, the fear that flickered in her ice-blue eyes. "Where is Magnus Varghmir?" she demanded of the harbor master, a grizzled old man who stepped forward with the careful politeness due to enemy nobility. "In the great hall, my lady, but then take me to him." Now, more figures emerged from the Ravenvik ships. Warriors, yes, but also women and children, old men and younglings who clutched bundles of possessions as if they contained their entire world. These were not raiders come to make war. These were refugees. "Astrid," Eirik said quietly, "run to the hall. Tell father that Ravenvik comes under the white banner of parley, and that they bring their people with them." She nodded and ran, her feet flying across the harbor stones. Eirik remained, watching as more boats disgorged their human cargo. Families, he realized, entire bloodlines fleeing from something that had driven them from their homeland. "Eirik Varghmir." Sigrid's voice made him turn. She stood before him now, close enough that he could see the exhaustion in her face, the way her hands trembled despite her iron composure. "We meet again, and once more, not as I would have chosen, my lady." He inclined his head, fighting the urge to reach out to her, to offer comfort he had no right to give. "What brings the daughter of Ravenvik to our shores? And why do your people flee as if the very hounds of hell pursue them?" Her laugh was bitter as winter wind. "Hell's hounds would be a mercy compared to what follows us." She stepped closer, and Eirik caught the scent of sea salt and something else. Fear, sharp and clean as new-forged iron. "Tell me, young wolf, do you know the old tales? The stories of the serpent that sleeps beneath the waves?" "You're Mungander." The word rose unbidden in Eirik's mind, but he did not speak it aloud. "I know them," he said carefully. "Then you know that when the serpent stirs, the seas themselves rise up to swallow the world." Her eyes met his, and in their depths he saw a terror that made his soul shiver. "3 nights ago, our scouts brought word from the eastern waters. Ships, Eirik. Ships unlike any seen in the memory of men, black as midnight, with sails that seemed to swallow light itself, and flying from their masts." She paused, her voice catching. "Flying from their masts, banners that bear no earthly symbol, but the coiled form of the world's serpent." The world seemed to tilt beneath Eirik's feet. The dying warrior's words in the forest, dark ships from the eastern sea, suddenly carried a weight that threatened to crush him. "How many ships?" he asked. "The scouts counted 30 before they fled. But there may be more, hidden beyond the horizon." Sigrid's hand moved to the silver pendant at her throat, a raven carved from bone and set with dark stones. "My father believes they are raiders from distant lands, seeking only gold and slaves. But she shook her head. "I have dreamed of black waters and burning skies. The seers of Ravenvik speak in whispers of the old prophecies, of the time when ice and fire would dance together and the children of men would face their final trial." Footsteps rang out across the harbor stones. Magnus Varghmir approached, flanked by his housecarl, and followed by half the clan's fighting men. His face was a mask of controlled fury, But Eirik saw the calculation in his father's eyes, the way he noted every Ravenvik warrior, every ship, every potential threat. Sigrid Ravenvik, Magnus said, his voice carrying the formal tone used for enemy nobility. You sail into my harbor without invitation, bringing armed men into my lands. Speak quickly, or I will assume this is the vanguard of invasion. Sigrid straightened, and Eirik saw the steel in her spine, the royal bearing that marked her as truly her father's daughter. I come under the ancient laws of sanctuary, Magnus Varghmir. My people seek shelter from a threat that cares nothing for clan feuds or family honor. What threat could drive the proud ravens from their eyrie? Magnus asked. But Eirik heard something in his father's voice, not just suspicion, but recognition, as if this moment had been long expected. The dark ship have come, as the prophecies foretold, Sigrid replied. 30 vessels of unknown make, crewed by warriors who fight like demons and take no prisoners. They struck our outermost settlements at dawn, 2 days past. Ravenholt, our fishing village, burns still. Every soul there, man, woman, and child, simply vanished. No bodies, no blood, no trace save ash and the stench of something that should not exist in the world of men. A murmur ran through the Varghmir warriors. Even the hardest among them, men who had faced berserkers and sea kings and the fury of winter storms, looked uneasy at these words. Magnus was silent for a long moment, his gray eyes studying Sigrid's face as if reading runes carved in stone. And your father, Jarl Morgrim, marshals our remaining forces at Ravenvik Keep. He sends me to treat with the other clans, to forge alliance against this threat. Her voice hardened. Even with you, Magnus Varghmir, though it pains him to ask aid from the man who— Choose your words carefully, girl, Magnus warned, his hand moving to his sword. You stand on my soil, breathe my air. Whatever grievances lie between our houses, you will speak them with respect or not at all. But Sigrid did not back down. The man who killed my brother stands before me, and you speak to me of respect. The harbor fell silent save for the lapping of waves against the dock. Eirik saw his father's face go white, then red, as if struck by a physical blow. Around them, hands moved to weapon hilts, and the very air seemed to crackle with the promise of violence. I killed no one's brother, Magnus said quietly, but his voice carried to every ear. If blood has been spilled between our clans, it was not by my hand. Liar! Sigrid's composure finally cracked, and Eirik saw the grief that burned beneath her royal mask. Bjorn Ravenvik was his name, and he died with your blade in his heart. But it was the old seer who stepped forward from among the Varghmir crowd, her bone trinkets clicking as she moved, her pale eyes fixed on Sigrid with the intensity of winter lightning. Bjorn Ravenvik died by treachery, child, but not by Varghmir hands. Her voice carried the authority of one who had lived through more winters than most could count. He died because he learned something he should not have learned, because he saw something he should not have seen. The blade that took his life bore Varghmir marks, yes, but it was wielded by one who served a different master. What master? Sigrid demanded. The seer's smile was terrible and knowing. The same master who now sends dark ships to cleanse these lands of all who might stand against the coming darkness. The same master who has played clan against clan, brother against brother, preparing us for slaughter. A new voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. Wise words from the Witch of Varghmir. All heads turned toward the speaker. A man in dark robes had emerged from one of the Ravenvik ships, his face hidden beneath a deep hood. But when he lowered the cowl, gasps echoed across the harbor. Kervald the Raven Priest stood before them, his gaunt face marked with ritual scars, his black eyes burning with fanatic fervor. In his hands he carried a staff topped with a raven's skull, and around his neck hung chains of bone and iron that clinked with each movement. "Kervald," Magnus growled, "I should have known. Where a Ravenvik seeks alliance, the priest sows discord." "I sow truth, Magnus the Kinslayer," Kervald replied, his voice carrying the sing-song cadence of religious madness. "Truth that your son must hear. Truth that may save us all from the doom that approaches." Eirik stepped forward, his young face hard with determination. "Then speak your truth, priest. But know that if it proves to be lies, you will answer for them." Kervald's laugh was like the cry of carrion birds. "Brave words, boy. But can you hear truth when it cuts deeper than any blade?" He raised his staff, and the raven skull seemed to fix its empty sockets on Eirik's face. "Your father knows what comes from the east, for he has seen it before. 20 years passed when the first dark ships tested our waters. It was Magnus Varghmir who drove them back. But the price?" His grin was horrible. "The price was a pact written in blood and sealed with souls." "Enough!" Magnus roared, his sword clearing its sheath with a ring of steel. "I will not hear more of your poison, priest." But Kervald did not flinch. "The pact holds still, Jarl of Varghmir. But the debt comes due at last. The dark ships return, and they bring with them the master of the covenant you signed. Tell me, does your son know the price you paid for 20 years of peace?" Magnus stood frozen, his blade half raised, his face a battlefield of rage, and something else, something that might have been shame. In that moment of hesitation, Eirik saw a truth that shattered his world like a hammer blow to glass. His father knew. Whatever came from the east, whatever evil rode the dark ships, Magnus Varghmir knew of it, had known all along. "Father?" Eirik's voice was barely a whisper. But before Magnus could answer, a new sound filled the air, the deep, resonant call of war horns from the harbor's mouth. Not the hunting horns of Varghmir or the eagle cry of Ravenvik, but something older, deeper, that seemed to rise from the very bones of the earth. On the eastern horizon, black sails appeared like wounds torn in the morning sky. The dark ships had come. Chaos erupted across the harbor. Fishermen shouted warnings as they hauled their boats toward shore. Women gathered children and fled toward the great hall. Warriors ran for weapons and armor, their feet drumming against stone and wood like the heartbeat of a dying giant. But through it all, Eirik stood transfixed, watching the approaching vessels. They moved against the wind, their black sails full despite the calm air. No oars disturbed the water at their sides, yet they came on with the relentless pace of destiny itself. "How many?" Sigrid asked, moving to stand beside him. In the face of this greater threat, clan enmity seemed suddenly as distant as childhood quarrels. Eirik counted the dark shapes against the gray sky. 12 ships, maybe 15. Hard to tell. They seemed to blend with the shadows between sea and cloud. "Too many," Magnus said grimly. He had sheathed his sword, his anger at Kervald forgotten in the face of immediate danger. "Our walls can hold against raiders, but not against a fleet." Kervald laughed, a sound like breaking bones. "Walls? What use are walls against those who serve the serpent beneath? What use is steel against warriors who died 1,000 years ago, yet fight on still?" "The dead do not sail ships," Sigrid snapped, but uncertainty colored her voice. "Do they not?" The priest gestured toward the approaching fleet with his skull-topped staff. Look closer, daughter of ravens. See with eyes unclouded by mortal assumptions. Eirik strained his vision, studying the nearest of the dark ships as it cut through the waters of the fjord. At first he saw only the sleek hull and billowing sails that had caught his attention before. But as the vessel drew nearer, details became clear that made his blood freeze in his veins. The ship's crew moved with inhuman precision, each figure perfectly synchronized with its fellows. They wore armor that seemed to drink light, helms that hid their faces in shadow so deep that not even the sun could penetrate it. And when one of them turned toward the shore, Eirik caught a glimpse of what lay beneath that helm, not flesh, but the pale gleam of bone. "Draugr," Astrid whispered, the word barely audible above the wind. "The restless dead." "Aye," Magnus said heavily. "I had hoped never to see their like again." "Again?" Eirik spun to face his father. "You have fought them before?" But before Magnus could answer, the lead dark ship ground against the harbor stones with a sound like grinding tombstones. From its deck came a figure that made even the bravest Varghmir warrior step backward. He was tall, taller than any mortal man, and wrapped in a cloak that seemed woven from midnight itself. His face was pale as fresh snow, beautiful in the way that winter peaks were beautiful, remote and terrible, and utterly without warmth. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of one who had commanded legions of the dead. "Magnus Varghmir," the figure called across the water. 20 years have passed since last we met. 20 years since you swore the oath that bought your people's safety. The time of reckoning has come." Magnus stepped forward, and Eirik saw that his father's hand shook as he gripped his sword hilt. "Gravnar Skuldvein, I had hoped the sea had swallowed you at last. The sea takes many things, old friend, but it cannot take what was never truly alive." Gravnar smiled, and his teeth were white as grave frost. "You remember our bargain? The price you agreed to pay for 20 years of peace?" "I remember." Magnus's voice was hollow as a burial mound. "Then you know why I have come." Gravnar gestured, and more figures emerged from the dark ships. Warriors in black armor, their movements too fluid, too perfect for living men. "The debt must be paid, Magnus. A life for 20 years of life. A soul to seal the covenant." Eirik felt the world spinning around him. A debt, a covenant. His father had made some pact with this creature of nightmare, and now the price was being claimed. "What life?" Magnus asked, though his eyes already knew the answer. Gravnar turned his gaze upon Eirik, and the young warrior felt as if ice water flowed through his veins. "The firstborn son of Varghmir, the one who carries the blood of both warrior and king. His soul will serve in my fleet. His strength will feed the endless war that rages beneath the waves." "No!" The word tore from Magnus's throat like a battle cry. "Take me instead. I made the bargain. Let me pay the price." "You?" Gravnar laughed, and the sound was like the grinding of glaciers. "You are old, Magnus, worn thin by years and worry. Your son is young, strong, his soul bright with unfulfilled oaths and unspilled blood. He will serve far better in the hosts of the deep." But Sigrid Ravenvik stepped forward, her chin raised in defiance. "You speak of ancient bargains and blood debts, creature of shadow. But you forget, the boy is under my protection now." All eyes turned to her in amazement. Gravnar tilted his head like a curious raven. "Your protection, daughter of Morgrim. How curious. What claim do you make upon the son of your enemy?" Sigrid's hand moved to the silver pendant at her throat, and Eirik saw her fingers trace ancient symbols carved into its surface. "By the old laws, By the rights of sanctuary and protection that even the dead must honor, I claim him as my betrothed. What threatens him threatens me. What would take him must first contend with all the power of Ravenvik. The words hit Eirik like a physical blow. Betrothed. The idea was impossible, unthinkable, and yet, as he looked into Sigrid's eyes, he saw not deception, but desperate truth. She was willing to bind her fate to his, to save him from this creature's hunger. Gravnar considered this, his pale face showing neither surprise nor anger. Interesting. The daughter of ravens seeks to protect the son of wolves. But tell me, child, are you prepared to pay the price such protection demands? What price? Sigrid demanded. The price is always the same, Gravnar replied. A life for a life. If you would shield him from his father's debt, then you must take his place in my service. Your soul for his freedom. Done, Sigrid said without hesitation. No! Eirik stepped between them, his hand on his axe. I will not hide behind a woman's sacrifice. If there is a debt to be paid, then let it be paid by the one who owes it. Which one? Gravnar asked, amused. The father who made the bargain, or the son who must inherit its consequences? The enemy who offers herself as shield, or the clan that accepted 20 years of peace bought with borrowed time? The harbor had grown silent save for the lapping of waves and the cry of gulls overhead. Every eye was fixed upon the tableau at the water's edge. The death-pale lord, the defiant princess, the young warrior caught between duty and desire, and the father whose secrets threatened to destroy them all. It was Korvald who broke the silence, his mad laughter echoing across the water. Do you see now, children of the North? Do you understand how perfectly you have been played? Clan set against clan, warrior against warrior, while the true enemy gathered strength in the deep places of the world. Your feuds, your hatred, your pride, all of it has served the serpent's purpose. Explain yourself, priest, Magnus commanded. The dark ships care nothing for your petty kingdoms or your mortal ambitions, Korvald replied. They serve a power older than the gods themselves, a hunger that devours light and hope and memory. But they are patient, these servants of the deep. They know that united, the clans of the North might stand against them. Divided, he shrugged. Divided, we are but morsels to be consumed at leisure. Gravnar nodded approvingly. The priest speaks wisdom, though it comes too late to save you. Your father's bargain bought time, but it did not buy freedom. The debt remains, and it will be paid. Then take me, Eirik said, stepping forward. I am the one you want. Let the others go free. Brave, Gravnar mused. Foolish, but brave. You would die for your clan, boy. You would surrender your soul to spare them suffering? I would, even knowing that your sacrifice would be meaningless, that once you are gone, I will take them anyway, one by one, until every soul in this harbor feeds the hunger of my master. The words struck like hammer blows, but Eirik did not waver. Then what do you truly want? Gravnar smiled, and in that expression was all the cruel patience of the grave. I want what I have always wanted, to see the strong kneel before the inevitable. But perhaps there is another way. He gestured toward the dark ships that filled the harbor mouth. My master grows impatient with this land and its people. He would sweep it clean, start fresh with more malleable subjects. But if the clans could be convinced to serve willingly, to bend the knee and swear new oaths, he shrugged. Even death can be merciful to those who embrace it. Service to what? Sigrid demanded. To the order that will replace your chaos. To the peace that comes when all voices are silenced, all wills bent to a single purpose. Gravnar spread his arms wide, encompassing the harbor, the ships, the terrified faces that watched from every shadow. Your gods are dead or dying, your heroes fall into dust and memory. But we offer something eternal, a place in the fleet that sails forever, strength that will never fade, victory that knows no ending. A place as walking corpses, Magnus spat, as slaves to your serpent master. As soldiers in the greatest war ever waged, Gravnar corrected. The war between order and chaos, between the peace of the grave and the suffering of the living. Choose wisely, Magnus Varghmir. You have until sunset to decide. He turned toward his ship, but Sigrid's voice stopped him. What of the bargain you spoke of? The debt that brought you here? Gravnar looked back over his shoulder, his pale eyes gleaming with dark amusement. Oh, that debt will be paid regardless of your choice, daughter of ravens. The only question is whether it will be paid in willing service or in screaming agony. With that, he vanished into the shadow of his vessel, leaving behind only the stench of old graves and the sound of his inhuman crew preparing for war. Eirik stood on the dock, his world transformed in the span of a single conversation. The dark ships blocked the harbor mouth like a wall of midnight. His father's secrets lay exposed like wounds in the morning light, and beside him, Sigrid Ravenvik, his enemy, his protector, perhaps something more, watched the horizon with eyes that held the weight of prophecy. 20 years, Magnus said quietly, as if speaking to himself. 20 years of peace bought with promises I never meant to keep, and now the ravens come home to roost, Sigrid finished, and we must all face the price of our father's choices. A raven cawed overhead, circling slowly above the harbor. As Eirik watched, it settled on the mast of the nearest dark ship, its black eyes glittering with intelligence that was not quite avian, not quite human. The bird that had warned him of his fate now bore witness to its fulfillment. But whether that fulfillment would come as salvation or destruction, only the turning of the tide would tell. Sunset was 6 hours away. End of Chapter 3. Next chapter, preview. With the dark ships at their harbor and sunset fast approaching, Magnus must reveal the terrible bargain that bought 20 years of peace. As ancient enemies circle like wolves, Eirik faces an impossible choice. Honor his father's debt, or watch everything he loves burn. In blood and prophecy, the raven's warning finally finds its mark. If you wish to walk further into the saga, subscribe and return when the raven calls again.